Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at Psalm 18, where we find a song of deliverance. The superscription is going to be the longest that we've seen up to this point, maybe the longest in the Psalms. For the choir director, a psalm of David, the servant of the Lord, who spoke to the Lord the words of the song in the day that the Lord delivered him. That's why we call it a song of deliverance. Delivered him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. Wow, that's a long superscription. And of course, it takes us back to the time when David was on the run from Saul and David was delivered. And now the psalm starts off, verse 1, and he said, I love you, O Lord, my strength. Now, when he says, I love you, that's not the normal word for love. This is irkamka. It's the Cal imperfect of racham. As I said, that's not the normal word for love. It still has the same basic meaning, perhaps a bit deeper love. Um, Very oftentimes, that term is used to describe compassion or pity or love that a like the greater person has for the lesser person. That sort of idea, like the love that a mother has for a child, maybe even a child in the womb. Actually, it sounds a little bit. I don't know if they're related at all, but it sounds a little bit like the word for womb. Rechem is the word for the mother's womb. Maybe there's no relationship between there, so don't necessarily make a connection there. But in this case, it's the psalmist saying, "I love you." And notice the psalmist is speaking about himself or another. It sounds like he said. Of course, and then this is going back to the superscription. The superscription talks about this being a psalm of David, and so David is seen saying, "I love you, O Lord, my strength." Next, we go to verse 2. The Lord is my rock and my fortress. Little side note, that word fortress is the term Matsuda. Sounds a little bit, and really because it comes from the same root word, Masada. Remember, there's this big giant fortress in Israel by the Dead Sea. Where it's a mountain and then a fortress on top of it. That's the idea behind this term. So look at that and think God is my not just a little tiny rock. He is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. My God, my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation. The horn, don't think of necessarily a musical instrument, but rather the horn of an animal that was its strongest defense. The horn of my salvation, my stronghold. And then he goes on, I call upon the Lord who is worthy to be praised, and I am saved from my enemies. Now, what we've seen here is the source of deliverance, that the Lord is the source of the psalmist's deliverance. But now we go from there to the need of deliverance, beginning in verse 4. The cords of death encompassed me, and the torrents of ungodliness terrified me. The cords of Sheol, which is another way of saying the cords of death, that noted a little bit of parallelism here. The cords of Sheol surrounded me. The snares of death confronted me. Um, David says, I was in a bad place. I was in a very bad place. I was about to go under. That's the situation in which I was facing. In my distress, I called upon the Lord and cried to my God for help. He heard my voice out of his temple. So notice that's the place of deliverance. It's out of the temple. That's the presence of God. That's what signified the presence of God. And my cry for help before him came into his ears. He heard my cry. And then we see God moving, beginning in verse 7. This is the coming of the Lord. Then the earth shook and quaked. Notice the language of it's natural language, but it's also this is God doing it. The earth shook and quaked. The foundations of the mountains were trembling and were shaken because he was angry. Smoke went out from his nostrils, and fire from his mouth devoured. Coals were kindled by it. He bowed the heavens also and came down with thick darkness under his feet. You can see all of these elements in nature, like a thunderstorm and earthquake and things that we see in nature, but they are all being attributed here to the Lord doing this. We continue. He rode upon a cherub. Now, a cherub is like this mighty angel, and remember, on the Ark of the Covenant, you had the statues of two. When you want to say plural, you say cherubim. Eem is masculine plural. So he rode upon a cherub and flew, and the idea is that represents the throne of God, but they're winged creatures, so they can go where they want. And so this is the throne of God, and yet it's portable. It's like a chariot. It's like it goes wherever he wants. He rode upon a cherub and flew. He sped upon the wings of the wind. He made darkness his hiding place, his canopy around him, darkness of waters, thick clouds of the sky. And so this, again, the thunderstorm, the thunderous sort of vision that you have here, that's a picture of the Lord's movement. Verse 12, from the brightness before him passes thick clouds, hailstones, and coals of fire. This is all describing God's movement, his movement into history. Verse 13, the Lord also thundered in the heavens, and the Most High uttered his voice, hailstones and coals of fire. He sent out his arrows and scattered them, and lightning flashes in abundance and routed them. And so here God comes up against David's enemies, that which is troubling him, that which is about to bring him down. God intervenes with all his strength, with all his majesty. Verse 15, then the channels of water appeared. Again, think, thunderstorm, lightning, rains, the foundations of the world were laid bare at your rebuke, O Lord, at the blast of the breath of your nostrils. He sent from on high, he took me, he drew me out of many waters. And so here God shows up in all this thunderous glory, and he takes David. He says, he drew me out of the place where I was about to go under, where I was about to drown. He drew me out of many waters. We continue the deliverance theme. He delivered me from my strong enemy and from those who hated me. So notice the enemy, those who hated me. This is not a nameless foe. Well, we already saw in the superscription, Saul was behind all this. But it's not just Saul by himself. It's Saul and all his armies, the people that are on his side, the people that have all taken a stand against David. And from those who hated me, for they were too mighty for me. And notice, they confronted me in the day of my calamity, but the Lord was my stay. And so, by contrast, he brought me forth also into a broad place. He rescued me because he delighted in me. Now, when he says that he delighted in me, there's a excuse me, there's a change where we're going to look at the idea that David has been rewarded. Notice as he says, according to my righteousness. Now, we've seen this in a previous psalm where David protests his innocence and he says, look, I was on the right, and therefore the Lord came and the Lord has rewarded me. Not Notice it doesn't say out of his grace, and I'm not saying God is not gracious, but according to my righteousness. So he's looking at God as the just judge who has intervened. According to the cleanness of my hands, he has recompensed me. For I have kept the ways of the Lord and have not wickedly departed from my God. And so he's saying, look, I have been righteous, verse 22, for all his ordinances were before me, and I did not put away his statutes from me. I was doing what I was supposed to do. And these people attacked me for no good reason. It wasn't like they attacked me because I had been sinning. I didn't bring this on myself. And so he claims, look, I was innocent. I was the innocent party. And God intervened in justice. He recognizes and he thanks God for God's justice in coming to his defense. We continue with the claim of innocence. I was also blameless with him, and I kept myself from iniquity. Therefore, the Lord has recompensed me according to my righteousness, according to the cleanliness of my hands in his eyes. That David says, I've been innocent all throughout. In verse 25, he moves to the justice of God's response. How with the kind you show yourself kind, with the blameless you show yourself blameless, with the pure you show yourself pure. And then alternatively, with the crooked, you show yourselves astute. It's not like, God is crooked. He recognized the crookedness of those who are crooked. He goes on, for you save an afflicted people, but the haughty eyes you abase. And so God has responded in justice toward David, but also toward the enemies of David. He continues at verse 28, for you light my lamp. The Lord my God illumines my darkness. Um, for by you I can run upon a troop, and by my God I can leap over a wall. So he says, look, because God has strengthened him, I can I can outrun a whole army. I can run upon them. I can jump over a wall. It's almost like I can do all these things not because I'm so great, but because you have lit my lamp, you have strengthened me, you have done these things because they were the right things to do. Verse 30, as for God, his way is blameless. The word of God is tried. He is a shield. Now, when it says he's a shield, don't think this little tiny hand shield that sometimes you've seen, some of the people use. Here's an inscription of a sword. This is actually from Mycenae. But it's the same era as in which David was living. And they had these huge body shields, so much so that sometimes you need to have an armor bearer, somebody to hold the shield. And God is described in that way. He is a shield to all who take refuge in him. That's the idea behind here. We continue verse 31, for who is God but the Lord? And who is a rock except our God, the God who girds me with strength and makes my way blameless. He makes my feet like hind's feet. Now, I don't usually talk too much about hind unless I'm talking about the the hindquarters of something. But a hind, that's a description of a certain kind of animal. We would say like a ram. This is like a mountain going animal. And it's amazing. Now you look at this picture and you say, "Oh goodness, that animal's fallen down. It's about to be killed." No, actually, they are very comfortable there. Their feet are able to wedge themselves into these little tiny cracks where I'd be hard pressed, and I've done rock climbing. I'd be hard pressed to hold myself up in that, but they're able to do that. Notice he makes my feet like hinds feet. I can look like I'm in a really dangerous, precarious place. And notice, sets me upon my high places. That's the place of safety. And David says, he has put me in a place of safety as well. Even though it looks precarious, it's actually the safest place I can be. He trains my hands for battle so that my arms can bend a bow of bronze. Notice the warfare theme, because after all, David was a man of war. You have also given me the shield of your salvation, and your right hand upholds me, and your gentleness makes me great. You enlarge my steps under me, and my feet have not slipped. And so, in all of these things, warfare. Remember, David, even when he was on the run from Saul, there were times where he found himself still in conflict. Didn't go to conflict with Saul, but with others. And in all of that, he sees God as upholding him. Verse 37, notice he's going to be speaking about his victory in battle. I pursued my enemies and overtook them. I did not turn back until they were consumed. I shattered them so that they were not able to rise. They fell under my feet. Reminds us of the imprecatory Psalms, only now it's past tense. It's already happened. And you caused this to happen, O Lord. Continues of same victory in battle, for you have girded me with strength for battle. You have subdued me. You have subdued under me those who rose up against me. You have also made my enemies turn their backs to me, and I destroyed those who hated me. So he's saying, look, my enemies were God's enemies. My enemies were God's enemies because they had been doing wrong. And you, Lord, came and set the record straight, and you upheld me in the battle against them. Continues, they cried for help, those enemies, they cried for help, but there was none to save, even to the Lord, but he did not answer them. Then I beat them fine as the dust before the wind. I emptied them out as the mire of the streets, I went through them in no uncertain terms. Now, at this point, verse 43, it's interesting because remember, this is a Psalm of David. But as I'm reading, I can't help but think of David's greater son. And I'm not saying that this is referring now to somebody else. This is still David. For you have delivered me from the contentions of the people. You have placed me as the head of the nations. A people whom I have not known serve me. So he's saying, look, David has come out of that whole Saul situation to become leader, not just of the people of God, not just the people of Israel, but far beyond that. And that's why I read this and it reminds me of the greater son of David who showed himself not just to be the king of the Jews, but who sent out his apostles and said, go make disciples of the peoples, of the nations, the ones that are out there. Verse 44, as soon as they hear, they obey me. Foreigners submit to me. Foreigners fade away. And it's true that David exercised his authority not just in Israel, but over the enemies out there of Israel. But I'm reminded of the one who did the same thing, not by force of arms, but by the force of his death and burial and resurrection. And notice they come trembling out of their fortresses. The same theme continues in the next verse, verse 46. The Lord lives, and blessed be my rock, and exalted be the God of my salvation. You see, it's, he's calling, yes, that the Lord lives, and we're reminded not just that the Lord lives, but the Lord Jesus also lives and is exalted as a result. He goes on, the God of my salvation, the God who executes vengeance for me and subdues people under me. And so here in these closing words of the psalm, we see that he executes vengeance, he subdues people. Um, and that's, again, that imprecatory nature that we saw. And yet Jesus accomplishes that not by force of arms, not by killing people, but by subduing them and making them his own. You see, the reason we trust in him is because he has subdued us. He has won the victory and he has brought us to himself. Verse 48, he delivers me from my enemies. Surely you lift me above those who rise against me. He's speaking to the Lord. You rescue me from the violent man. And now the closing two verses, verses 49 and 50. Therefore, I will give thanks to you among the nations, O Lord, and I will sing praises to your name. He gives great deliverance to his king and shows loving kindness and notice to his anointed, to his Mashiach. This the Messiah, the Christ is what we call him. And yes, this is speaking to David, and we close on that note, to David and to his descendants. To his descendants, the Hebrew there is Zerah, to his seed forever. Who is the seed of David? Ultimately, it's Jesus. And because we've been connected to him, we become part of that forever family as we believe in him.